Before Sonic came out in the previous year, 1990, Sega released their handheld console, the Game Gear, compared to the Game Boy. And it was interesting since it has basically the same power as their home console, the Master System, so they can transfer games easily between the two consoles. And Sega wanted Sonic to be on the Game Gear and Master System. So, what did they do? They hired this guy, Yozo Koshiro. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Like I said, I'm really bad at pronunciation. And why did they hire him? Well, they liked him, basically. He has no experience developing games. He is a composer for video games. And he's like, oh, I don't know what to do, I guess I'll hire a bunch of people. So he formed a company known as Agent to make a port of Sonic 1 to the Master System and the Game Gear. However, since the hardware is so different, they decided to make kind of a different version while porting over 3 of the zones from Sonic 1, that being Green Hill Zone, Labyrinth Zone, and Scrap Brain Zone. And so, Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 8-bit, released later the same year as Sonic 1 on Genesis, the same year. Quite a runtime. So yeah, so a lot of stuff wasn't translated well, especially the mechanics of the games. The momentum physics engine of the Genesis was not here. Instead, we got a more traditional platformer with some elements of speed. In the first level, Green Hill Zone, Sonic moves way faster than the screen. In fact, it can barely keep up unless you die to a crab meat, like this footage just happened. The story is mostly the same, but this time we get a little map of South Island, showcase where Sonic's progress is. And in the end, you get to get rid of pollution, which is pretty nice. Still growing flowers get rid of pollution. Isn't that great? A lot of elements from the Sonic 1 16-bit appear in this game, like Sonic speed. Sonic's still fast, but most level does not correlate to that. In fact, playing the Game Gear is actually pretty hard to maintain your speed because of how small the screen is and how easy it is to run into obstacles. So most of the game is dedicated to platforming rather than moving fast. Though Act 1 in Green Hill is the one you can experience the most speed. One thing you will notice that's lacking is the loop-de-loops. Sonic's iconic thing, going for loops, is not in this game. They've been made in later Sonic 8-bit games, but Sonic 1 8-bit does not have loops. Act 2 of Green Hill is actually a little different. We go into kind of this underground area with water and such, which requires, like I said, a lot more platforming and speed. Unlike the first act, feels like it's trying to port the Genesis gameplay, but in this level it showcases that, no, they're just trying to do some platforming. Nothing too bad. In fact, Green Hill Zone 8-bit is probably one of the easiest Sonic zones in all time. The only thing that might trick you up is the new ring mechanics. The rings, because of the way the 8-bit systems work, so that wouldn't really work to showcase all those rings flying out. Even 16-bit, it can slug sometimes if you have too many rings. So most of the time, you will lose, if you lose all your rings, you have like 100, you will, like, one ring will come out of Sonic, which basically means that your hit points are a lot worse, which actually makes this game a little more trickier because of that. There's also Chaos Emeralds hidden around the level rather than special stages. There are still special stages in the game, but they do not give you Chaos Emeralds. There are 6 and they're in each unique hidden location, which does help with the exploration vibe that Sonic usually gives off. So that's fun, but unless you're looking for them, you're not going to find them. They are pretty tricky-dicky sometimes, as I like to say. And also, like I said, the ending doesn't really change the ending that much. Though it is a little better than the 16-bit ending, because you get to actually see, or not only does Sonic save the day, but gets rid of the Scrap Brain Zone entirely, unlike in the Genesis version where all it does is make flowers grow. Not too exciting, if you ask me. When it comes to the enemies, we are not experiencing any new enemies. They're pretty much all transferred over from the 16-bit version, so no new enemies to go over, but I will mention the ones that appear in each zone, like I did in the last review. And if you want to know more about these enemies, stuff like that, go watch the first video if you haven't already. I mean, why are you watching this without watching the first video? But yeah, the enemies that appear in Green Hill Zone are Buzz Bomber, Crab Meat, Motobug, and that's it. They pretty much act the same way they do it in their 16-bit version. If you get 50 rings at the end of the stage, like you do in the first game, you go into the special stages. And these special stages are just Sonic bouncing around, basically going crazy, hitting rainbow lollipops in the night sky. And the main goal here is just to collect a bunch of rings to get lives and find continue boxes. So there is no incentive to really go to these unless you want some bonuses. And there's a time limit, so you can't stay in here too long. Just gotta watch out for that time limit, and yeah. It is nice to get extra lives because you're going to need it later in the game. But overall, not too important to go here. And plus, I don't think there's a lot of rings in this game, so it's a little bit tricky to get to these special stages because of the lack of rings and how hard it is to keep hold of multiple rings in this game due to the fact that only one drop if you get hit. Boss of Green Hill Zone sucks. It's just Eggman flying around, and this boss is quite literally only called Green Hill Zone Boss. Creative name, I know. So Eggman dives down, and you just easily hit him. I guess he charges at you. I guess that can hurt you, but at the same time, it's lame, Eggman. You need to get better inventions. What happened to your wrecker ball? Come on. Interesting fact about the Sonic 8-bit compared to 16-bit is they both have 3 acts, but however the Sonic 8-bit, you immediately just go to the boss fight and that's all the level. And you have no rings, so even though this boss fight is super easy, you can die pretty easily because they don't give you any rings, which is kind of weird if you ask me, but whatever. That's what they decided to do. So unlike Act 3 in Sonic 1, where you have a bit of a level to play before you get to the boss, Act 3 of Game Gear, or Master System, whatever you're playing on, I would recommend finding the Master System version, though we'll get to how expensive it is later on in the video, because of the bigger screen. But yes, Act 3 is just a boss fight with no rings, so it could be a little tricky. Next zone in Sonic 8-bit is Bridge Zone, a brand new zone which looks very similar to Green Hill Zone, except there are bridges now. Amazing, I know. And Bridge Zone, if you couldn't guess by its name, has tons of bridges. Bridge Zone includes the enemies Buzz Bomber, Chopper, and Spikes. There's quite a lot of choppers. The first act is not too bad, and the music's great. I would play it, but my Green Hill Zone got copyright claimed in the last video, so I don't know if I want to do that. What was that about? It didn't really affect the video, but at the same time, if I want to monetize it later, I can't do it. But everyone knows what Green Hill Zone sounds like, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, this is basic. Bridge Zone Act 1 is pretty basic level. You can find all sorts of stuff, like getting killed. But Act 2 is a little different. For some reason, they thought it'd be a good idea to make it an auto-scroller, and it's about as fun as it sounds. Not at all. So what could have been a fun level is just slowed down entirely, which does not fit the theme of Sonic, of trying to see how fast you can beat the level. Even if the mechanics aren't there as well as the 16-bit version, it still sucks that you have to slow down for a level like this. The Bridge Zone boss, which is what it's called, Eggman comes above the water and he shoots missiles at you. And unfortunately, if you're like me, you'll die because you forgot that you have no rings. It's similar to a future boss fight in Sonic 2, in Hilltop Zone, actually. So, yeah, it's kind of like that, except you have no rings. And that can be tricky. But all you gotta do is bounce on Eggman's head, and it's pretty easy to take out. The only problem is, like I said, you have no rings. And that, sometimes, if you're like me, you always think you have rings, it can be tricky. Also, if you bounce on them too much, you might accidentally go through them and die. That always sucks in these games. Entering the jungle. Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games. This zone is basically a nice little jungle joyride. And like I said, the music's actually pretty good. Some of the tracks were repeated from the original Sonic game in 8-bit version, which are already great. But the basically the director of the game, well, maybe not the director, I don't think he even is, he's just the guy they hired to do it, to compose the music for the game. They're all snappy tunes. Maybe not as good as the 16-bit counterparts, but they still are pretty good. From Bridge Zone to Jungle Zone, you'll be having a hell of a time dancing along to the music, as well as platforming. Jungle Zone, you're basically crawling through vines and climbing up waterfalls. It's not a bad zone. Act 2 is a lot different than Act 1, but we'll get to that when we get to that. This level includes the enemies of Chopper, Crabmeat, and Neutron, and like I said, they act the same as their 16-bit counterparts, so not a whole lot to say there. It can get a little tricky in Act 2, because instead of going left to right, like Sonic usually does, Sonic is going up the waterfall, which is actually not too bad, but it's mostly a lot of platforming and not a lot of momentum. In Act 1 had quite a few little momentum spots, but here we're just worried about getting up this waterfall. And the problem with that is that if you fall off of one of the platforms, which is it's pretty easy to do, you die, because you can't go to a lower level, basically. Because when the platforms are gone below your screen, that automatically becomes a bottomless pit, which can be pretty annoying, especially if you're not used to level layout. And there's not a whole lot of saves. So yeah, if you miss a jump right there that used to be a platform, you'll just die. I don't like when games do that. I'm not a big fan of bottomless pits in general. Sonic 8-bit games usually have a lot of bottomless pits as compared to their 16-bit counterparts, which don't usually have bottomless pits. I'm not a big fan of instant death mechanics like that. That log immediately fell down, and you basically have no reaction time. That's why I had to use save states in this game. Sorry, I couldn't beat it without them. Once again, that's the name of the boss. Eggman shoots a ball at you, and you gotta dodge it while trying to hit him, but it's also hard because the closest you can get to hit him, he drops the ball, and you can get hit easily by the ball by just easily bouncing off him, or just hitting him, and the ball just happens to be in the same hitbox as Sonic. So this is one of the actual most annoying bosses of the game. It won't be that hard, but the fact that Sonic has no rings makes it so you have to retry this over and over again. I don't know if it's because the emulator I was playing it on, because it's easiest for me to record an emulator. I can't really capture from my Game Gear, or whatever. But it was really annoying, this boss fight. I have no idea why they designed it to be like this. Whoever designed it, what were you thinking? That's all I can say. This really was one of the hardest things ever to do in any boss fight. And it really should have been a simple boss fight, but because the hitboxes were so bad, I kept dying over and over again. It's a lot harder than it looks. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. But it gets worse because the next zone is Labyrinth Zone, and it's worse than the 16-bit version. I'm not joking. Labyrinth Zone is somehow worse in this game. The game wasn't as fast as the 16-bit version, so it already had that going for it. But Sonic moves even slower here. He also drops like a rock there. Like, holy crap. There's a lot less air bubbles. You move a lot less slow, and you got a lot more platforming to do in very slow parameters. Sonic jumping underwater is one of the least fun things in the world, and this level has a lot of it. In fact, there's little checkpoints too, makes it so if you die, you have to go back far and have to redo a lot of stuff. Even just jumping to the one little area there is a chore to do because of how bad the mechanics are underwater. Labyrinth Zone is an awful zone. So the Genesis counterpart, it feels similar to the Genesis version, except, more annoying. Like this spear, which I swear was really impossible to get over because of how weird Sonic's hitbox is in this game. Even after trying it over and over again, I found it really difficult just to jump over this thing. Like, I'm not joking. I kept dying, even though it doesn't make any sense. I was thinking, what's going on here? It's so specific, that one jump, and it's so tricky. Like, what were they thinking there? I mean, I know I'm quoting other reviewers, but seriously, what were they thinking of those spears? Those spears can go right up my ass for all I care. But anyway, let's talk about other elements of this level. The enemies are the exact same as the Genesis counterpart, being the Burrowbot, Jaws, and the Orbinauts, though you won't be seeing a whole lot of them. The Orbinauts are very annoying in the zone, because, again, they're as slow as Sonic, and you can't really jump over them, so you gotta wait. But also, you gotta wait for your air bubbles to get back. It's just a nightmare all around. It goes from pretty basic to incredibly hard randomly. And it's not the hardest game in the world. It's just the fact that there's some little mechanic gimmicks that make it hard. Like, I swear, Sonic's hitbox in this game is a lot bigger than it really should be. The fact that the ring management is a lot worse in this game compared to 16-bit because of the ring limitations. And this boss is also annoying. It won't be that bad in the 16-bit version with the better momentum physics and rings. But since you have no rings, you have to dodge a lot of obstacles, and it's mostly a waiting game. But sometimes you get a little patient, you wait, and then you die. It's annoying. Those missiles come out. It's like, okay, I gotta dodge the missile. Also waiting for Eggman. No, not the hardest, but there's so much stuff to dodge, and there's so little opportunity to hit him, making the Labyrinth Zone boss, as it's called, pretty annoying. But not as hard as the Jungle Zone boss. At least that's one good thing I can say about this boss. The next zone is Scrap Brain Zone, another zone from the Sonic the Hedgehog game original, and it looks pretty similar to its 16-bit counterpart. But is it as hard or is it easier? Well, it's easier. It's actually a lot easier. Believe it or not. There's actually not very many obstacles, and they're pretty easy to miss. Plus, there's plenty of rings, and not a whole lot of enemies. In fact, they pretty much cut out all the enemies except for 2 in this level, except for the Ball Hog and Caterkiller. So we're basically lacking a bunch of the enemies from the 16-bit version, and we have a lot less traps. I will still die because I suck, but other than that, it's not that hard. Well, Act 1 of Scrap Brain Zone is surprisingly easier than Jungle Zone, Act 2, and the whole entirety of Labyrinth Zone. There's interesting stuff like alternate pathways to take in here in Act 2 of Scrap Brain Zone, which makes it very annoying. You gotta run back and forth to find out which pathway is the right one, and do a puzzle mechanics, and it's quite annoying. It's like, what the heck is going on here? I just want to end this level. They're not as very easy to figure out as other Sonic puzzles will be, so it's kind of weird. You just gotta take a path and hope it's right, and then if you don't get it right, you have to go find another exit. It's kind of annoying unless you don't know what you're doing. If you do, it's not bad, but if you're a first-time player, this area can be really annoying, because it's one of those things, where did I go kind of game. And this isn't a Metroidvania, it's a traditional 2D platformer, but all of a sudden it becomes one. Like here, you gotta press this switch here for the other pathway, so you gotta go back. But it's not really that intuitive, because it's the only time in the game where you had to do something like that, so if you didn't know any better, then you'd be stuck, because this isn't, like I said, this isn't a Metroidvania, it's a Sonic game, so that's kind of confusing. Much like in the 16-bit version, Act 3 does not have a final boss, however it's not a repeat of Labyrinth Zone, thank goodness. So we got a spring maze, which, unlike the first maze, isn't as complicated, at least it's more intuitive. There's different pathways you gotta take in order to find the correct one to get all the way to the top. It works a lot better than the Act 2 one, where you gotta figure out to go backwards. Like I said, once you figure it out the first time, it's not too hard. But other than that, I'm not a big fan of the maze situation of the second act. Well, Act 3's maze is much easier, and you got Chase the Eggman. He's faster than Sonic. How is he faster than Sonic? Well, he's going to his next base, a new exclusive final level in Sonic the Hedgehog 8-bit. That being Sky Base Zone. Eggman's base, well, in the sky. And this level looks pretty intimidating. It looks actually pretty cool to actually be playing in the clouds like this. But basically there's a lot of electricity going on from these little orbs. And there's two little enemies. We got the Orbinauts again, and we got Bomb, who I think is the first time they appear in this game. We got Cannon shooting at Sonic. A whole lot of stuff. Not a whole lot of rings, and bombless pits galore. At the end of Act 1, we go to this blimp, and that starts Act 2, where the second act is basically just trying to get to the top of the blimp. So there's a little story progression in the level, which I always like in Sonic games. Well, there's a lot of obstacles in Act 2. It's actually not too hard, and it's actually a very short level. But you gotta avoid the spike bar, which is pretty slow, but there's bombs in the way, so at least they make it up for it. Like, you gotta wait for the bombs to explode, while the spike bar is catching up to Sonic. Pretty interesting set piece. In fact, Sky Base Zone is actually a really great level. Once you make it inside Eggman's secret blimp fortress, we fight him, and the boss is called Sky Base Zone Boss, because you wouldn't expect them to name one yet. And basically, Eggman, you got him in his glass, but he's got this electric bar going. Basically, you say all the way left, you're good. But there's also another little wave that's going to hit you so you got to be careful of that. But however, you just play it right, much like the Sonic's final boss in the first 8/16-bit version, you'll do fine. So this boss is actually pretty basic. I think I only died once because I was stupid one time, but other than that, it was pretty basic. I wish all boss fights were like this. What I'm saying is, it's difficult, but it's more manageable, unlike the other previous boss fights, especially the jungle boss. That one can go suck my egg. But once Sonic beats Eggman, he cracks open the glass, and he has to chase after Eggman, who's once again faster than Sonic. And Eggman goes in his elevator, and, well, Sonic went there first, and that's the end of the game. If you didn't collect the Chaos Emerald, Sonic will basically just chase after Eggman, who acts like he's all high and mighty, like, I finally got one over Sonic. Sonic will be like, I hate you, and they'll hit him, and that's basically it for Sonic 8-bit. Interesting to note that during the credits, Sonic is shown singing in a microphone, a remnants of the Sonic band that was scrapped from the 16-bit version, but hey, Sonic, he's got the moves, and he can sure sing. After all, his shoes were based off Michael Jackson's shoes, and he has the personality of Bill Clinton. I'm not making that last part up again. In the good ending, we get a new cutscene of Sonic with all his Chaos Emeralds that go up in the sky, but instead of creating flowers, since there's already flowers there, so they don't need creating flowers, what happens is that they go up, it's very slow, they go up, they swirl around the South Island, and the pollution's gone. Isn't that nice? They did a whole lot, but that's the difference. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Sonic the Hedgehog 8-bit for the Master System and Game Gear. A noteworthy thing, since the Game Gear version has a smaller screen, Sonic's sprite's a little scrunched in, unlike the Master System version we're watching here. And keep in mind, the Master System version in the United States is the only Sonic game on that console. All the other 8-bit games would have ported to the Master System, and they're sort of the better versions of the game, but we only got one, so the Master System did so terribly here. So Sonic 8-bit is the only Master System game of Sonic you can get. Not in other countries, you guys get a bunch of other Sonic games, especially Brazil, which has the most games on the Master System for Sonic. So, Brazilian guys, you're living large, because you got a bunch of Sonic on your Master System. Not that it matters. Sonic 8-bit is a pretty interesting game, and a unique way of seeing what an interpretation of Sonic looks like from an 8-bit perspective. It's not bad, but it definitely could have been a lot better. But you can tell from the time that this was just a small project, and for what they did, it's not bad. I think the difficulty spikes is my biggest problem. I don't like when games spike randomly in difficulty. You can say I need to get good, but at the same time, like, the game should have a better progression in difficulty, in my opinion. The hardest part should be always at the ending, and the easiest part should be always at the beginning, at least for the most part. There shouldn't be like levels that spike up randomly, or boss fights that feel almost impossible. There has to be a little bit of fairness to make you want to go again. And this game has a little bit of problem with that. Not too much, but yeah. Overall, it's not too worth going back to this game unless you're out of curiosity. Well, I like it. I think it's good. It's not the most interesting game in the world. It doesn't have that many unique zones. Well, I think there is some unique features in the game. Overall, it lacks Sonic's quote-unquote momentum that he's known for, as well as a lot of other elements that make Sonic Sonic. Sonic on Master System has a giant fluctuation in price. The average loose price now is $20, so at one point it was at $500 not that long ago. It's randomly went down by a lot, so I have no idea what that was about. But the complete price is still on the up and up. So basically, this game hit giant increase in sales randomly in 2018 to a point where it used to be a $50 game complete and a $30 game loose, to going a $500 game complete to a $300 game loose. Not many people are going to care about this, but this game, for some reason right now, in 2022, randomly, the game loose price went down by a lot. However, this game is still incredibly hard to find online. You won't find the US version very easily, though I don't think it matters if you get a PAL version or not. So I think that's one of the tricky things about this game. The PAL version is a lot easier to find, and I think that the Master System isn't region locked. If you really want to, I don't have a Master System, so it's not really worth it for me to pick up this game, or whatever. But if you want to, the complete version is pretty expensive, so you might as well pick up a loose cart, if you will, and just buy a case secondhand, or just buy the PAL version. I think it's mostly the same, maybe. Who knows? The Game Gear version of Sonic the Hedgehog 8-bit is pretty easy to find. I think $11 is actually pretty high for it nowadays. It's been slowly going up in price, but it's one of the most common games on the system. Not as common as the sequel, which is I think what came with the console at some point, so that's probably why it was so cheap. But yeah, Sonic Game Gear, not too hard. I have it. It's pretty easy to find. These are one of those games that came in boxes. That's why the complete price is so much higher than loose price, just to let you know. I only count really complete price when it really matters, when the actual case is actually easy to get. Boxes are always going to be really hard to find. So yeah, if you want it on the Game Gear, which I don't recommend because the Game Gear is not the best system to run on, because they can be really annoying and fickle consoles. So I don't recommend you buying this version, but if you want it for collecting purposes like I have, then go right ahead. The first re-release of Sonic 8-bit was actually on Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut. This game is pretty interesting because if you collect a certain amount of emblems in the game, you can unlock, well, Game Gear games. It takes quite a lot to unlock them. Like I think like 50 for each one, or maybe like 30. I'm not too sure. But yeah, basically you can unlock them. It's not the most ideal way to do it, but it's easy. It was easy for me because I love the game, so I 100% it. Even if people say the DX version is not as good as the original Adventure version. So if you have Sonic Adventure, you have Sonic 8-bit on it. Just to let you guys know. And only for the Sega Mega Collection Plus, not Sega Mega Collection, that's the Plus version on the Xbox and PS2, you can also find the 8-bit Sonic one. Fortunately, the game, us GameCube lovers don't have it. Well, we have it on Sonic Adventure DX, because it doesn't really matter that much. Like a lot of Sonic games, they have appeared on virtual consoles, so if you wanted Sonic 8-bit, which actually gave you the Master System, like if you had the Wii, unfortunately, like all the other Nintendo old stuff, it's been shut down recently, so you might have it on your Wii. If you don't, you can't buy it anymore. It's not really worth it. It was also on the 3DS, but that also got shut down. The 3DS version is the Game Gear version in particular. Probably the most easy way to play them is on Sonic Origins Plus for the Nintendo Switch, Xbox, and PS5, 4, and whatever. The previous consoles that might be able to play it. Only Sonic Origins Plus has it the physical release because, it's also on Steam. Because their base version did not have it. This game includes all Game Gear games, so if you want to play all Game Gear games, they are on the Adventure DX or Origins Plus, and they're pretty easy to emulate if you want to emulate them. So there's the easiest way to play Sonic 8-bit. They didn't add anything to the game like the other games in Sonic Origins, so it's just the direct copy of the 8-bit game into the game. So that's an easy way for you to play it. And that is all the differences for all the places you can get Sonic 8-bit. To end the video, I like to end with my tier list. Sonic 8-bit goes in the C tier. And not much to say about it. I think I said all I wanted to say about Sonic 1. A good port, but has some difficulty curves, and I'm a big fan of difficulty curves, at least in my opinion. And I'm a big fan of instant deaths in games. That's just my opinion. I feel it's a little archaic. Overall, it doesn't really hold up to the 16-bit version, but if you have one of the easy ways to play it, then why not give it a try? That is all I gotta say about Sonic 8-bit. The next time in Sonic videos, we are going to be covering the last two games in 1981, and they're weird ones. Sonic Eraser and Wacko Wacko, Sonic Patrol Car. And yeah, they are both very weird games. But we will talk about them in the next videos. So see you then. If you like this video, don't forget to go to my Patreon and become a member. Doing $1 will give you gives me all you need. All I need is $1 from one person, and that will make my day. Make sure to give a like and subscribe. And if you don't like the video, give a dislike. Showcase how mad you are at me for something I did. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.